My name is Zivin King, and I am part of Team Foxtrot. I am going to be covering the content for the film Breakfast at Tiffany's. Um, I'll say first off, one of the things I have to cover is the questions being asked is what is the images on the scene on the screen, and how the content of the camera angles and lighting, editing convey meaning. And the easiest way for me to do that was to view these scenes without the sound and dialogue right off the bat. So that's what I did. So that way I'm only judging and critiquing the movie off of what I see on the screen and the mannerism of the actors and actresses. So the opening scene of Breakfast at Tiffany's is a beautiful woman that gets out of a yellow cab with a red roof early in the morning. And she's dropped off in front of this business that turns out to be Tiffany's and Company, which is a famous and expensive jewelry store. The lady, turns out her name is Holly Golightly, is a character. She is played by Audrey Hepburn. And in the film, she's a small, petite woman. She has probably appears to be strawberry blonde hair, hazel eyes. She's wearing a black evening gown. She has these glamorous sunglasses on, a huge pearl necklace, these long gloves. So she's coming from somewhere in the evening, or she could be going to work. And that without the sound and the dialogue, you don't know exactly where she's coming from or if she's getting ready for work or not. Because here she is, she has coffee and she has what look like a fritter of some type, of some kind of pastry, and she's staring in the windows at the displays at Tiffany's. So what I'm getting with this message, what the message I'm getting from that is, okay, it's one of two things. Either she's responsible for the displays and she put the displays together and she's admiring it before she go to work and see if everything's right, or she's admiring it and wishing she could have it and she wants it. So it's hard to tell without the sound. But those are only two things that all the images displayed to me. And then you see her strolling from window to window as she's eating her pastry and drinking her coffee, and she winds up going home. So then later that morning, you have this other character, and it's Paul. I don't want to butcher his name, but it's like Verdak, and that's played by George Petter. And he's a tall, slender guy with his hair slicked back with this bronze, brownish hair, blue eyes, and he arrives in front of her apartment. And I had to go back and look because he arrived at her front of her apartment in the exact same yellow cab with the red roof. So I had to go look at the numbers and stuff. Like, oh, you got the same cab. I know it's a budget movie, but I just found it kind of weird. But again, there's no sound because I'm just going by what I see in the images. And the next shot is Holly's nameless cat laying in the bed next to her. Obviously, there's a buzz or something going on because the cat wakes her up. She gets up. She goes to the door. It appears that she is naked, sleeping. So she puts on this what appears to be a male tuxedo shirt, and she answers the door. And he's coming up the stairs. Paul's coming up the stairs, and he's buzzing the doorbell. They show a scene of him buzzing the doorbell repeatedly. So that makes me think he knows her. They're familiar with each other. He comes up the stairs and they make eye contact. They're having a conversation. Again, I'm not into the sound. I'm only going by the mannerisms and what images and what's being displayed on the screen. And she lets him in. They talk. She's changing clothes. So this whole scene, what I get out of this is they're very familiar with each other, and it could have been a boyfriend or he wants to be the boyfriend. It's hard to tell. So that whole scene of them getting together with their mannerisms, that's what I got out of it. But when you turn around and you add the sound and dialogue to it, it is definitely a different story. Um, they don't know each other. He met her for the first time. Um, she lets him in because he wants to use her phone. She realized she needs to get dressed and she has to go somewhere, and she starts explaining it to him, and he never makes his phone call. He helps her and get dressed and helps her get to a cab, and it was weird. The conversation that they're having, you could tell that she's basically, I don't, she's a gold digger. She's doing things for people. She, she's comes off at first as very airhead, flighty, but she's not. She's not that at all. She's a very strong and determined woman. She calculates everything she's doing, and she's looking for that quick and easy buck. So she's a hustler. And later on, you see she comes back. Paul is in his apartment. She makes her way to his apartment because she brought some gentleman back with her, and she ditches him, and she leaves her apartment, goes to Paul's apartment. And this is where we learn and see that Paul is almost, they're two peas in a pod, because Paul is a hustler himself. He's a kept man by a rich woman who basically he's a gigolo. And she basically Holly basically calls him out on it. And this is where I figure out that this movie is more or less a love story. And that Paul and Holly are two peas in a pod. They're both hustlers. And eventually they're going to wind up being together. And the message I wind up getting out of it, of watching the whole thing, is, people will give up something for the right person, or give up their way of life, or change their way of life for the right person. So both of them were hustlers, and they both gave up their lifestyle that they had to be together. So that's what I got out of that. And as far as the narrative structure of the film, I think it's what we would call a frame narrative structured film. And the story is being told through, I think, the eyes of Paul, because he's the first person, which is like a central narrator. And the reason I choose Paul, because the stories, it has to be told by someone who knows Holly. They're very familiar with her. They had to have firsthand knowledge of all the events that happened. And Paul is the only character in the movie that was present for every event and experience that happened during that film. So even the very ending, he's standing there when she finds a cat, and she figures out that she's going to stay. So I figured that's why I picked it and said that Paul is the person that would be the one that the story is being told and viewpoints through his eyes. And that's my analysis and content of Breakfast at Tiffany's.
All right. Hello, my name is Cheyenne. I am doing the production portion. The scene that I chose begins at 30 minutes and 48 seconds, and it ends at 39 minutes and 33 seconds, and it is the infamous party scene. So the questions that I have are: how might social and political influences have shaped the film and possibly served to limit or bias the information it conveys? So Breakfast at Tiffany's is based off of the novella from Truman Capote called Breakfast at Tiffany's as well. And he had several offers from different production companies, different studios for the book, but he ended up selling the rights to Paramount for making the film. So during this time, it was the time of optimism. This was Before, I believe it was before the Kennedy assassination, you know, people were looking up people things and go forward. And so, you know, there really wasn't a whole lot going on as far as what may have um, influenced the film politically, as far as any other messages conveyed. Let's see. The second question would be, how might the background of the producer, director, actors have influenced their performance? Um, so this goes back to Capote's novella being sold. He had envisioned his friend Marilyn Monroe playing the part of Holly, but the studio had selected Audrey Hepburn instead. And Capote had no say at this point because he had sold the rights completely. So he voiced his opinion, of course. He definitely let people know that he was not happy about what was happening. But the studio chose Audrey instead. So this kind of creates a two worlds, a rift kind of between what the writer wanted and what the production company wanted. Also, they were going to choose John Frankenheimer, who directed Reindeer Games and The Island of Dr. Moreau, but Audrey, who had a lot of say in the matter of who was going to direct, because they had picked her in place. Sure, and that were two things, so they went ahead and they chose Blake Edwards instead. And Edwards is known for doing lighter comedies and things like that. So Audrey wanted to break away from her usual role. She wanted to pursue something that was more adult for her. So that was the main reason behind choosing this role. So she wanted something different. The whole movie was budgeted at about $2.5 million. It had 28 distributing companies. Found really interesting that would have influenced their performance was the fact that the directors ordered alcohol for the infamous party scene, and they actually let all the actors drink during that scene. So what you saw was real interaction between people, real drunk people. So there was a less inhibited performance to the camera and more spontaneity. And obviously there's some choreographing because she does burn a woman's hat with her extremely long cigarette holder. And so there is some choreography going on, but for the most part, it's real interaction, and that's something that really adds to the character of that scene and to the character of Audrey, and also the character that the apartment itself brings, this barren apartment that this very lively woman lives in. And how might the sponsoring agency, like studio or government agency, have influenced the message of the film? So one thing that I did find really interesting as well was that the Motion Picture Association deemed the story too sexual for the time. So they had to essentially dumb down or make Holly's character less promiscuous and less sexual. Otherwise, they were going to shut the production down. And also, let's see, there was something else. They changed the story completely. So the writer, George, oh, I had his name. I don't have his name on here. His name's George. The screenwriter changed the story because the original story was apparently very dark, very sad. Paul was actually a gay man that Holly befriended, and they changed that because they figured the audience doesn't want that kind of story. They want a romance. So they changed the story entirely and made it a romantic comedy, and made her character less promiscuous because I didn't know this until reading into it, she's actually a call girl. And you don't really understand that too much. It's not blatantly put out there. You get little hints here and there, little, we were discussing it earlier, $50 for the powder room. And I was thinking, does that mean that they pay her to go with her to the powder room? Or I don't understand how that works, but that would make sense, filling that role of call girl. So let me make sure that I have everything here. And the little black dress, Audrey is friends with Herbert Dagabenchi, who created the little black dress, and then started this whole fashion movement of the little black dress, the minimalist fashion. So that was something that also played. The little black dress could be a character of its own. You see that, and you know right away. You see a cigarette, a long cigarette stick, and a black dress and a small tiara. You know exactly what's going on there. So that was the production behind my 9 minute and few odd second scene from Breakfast at Tiffany's.
My name's Ben Miller, and I'm going to be doing the reception for scenes in Breakfast at Tiffany's. And the scene that I chose to pick was the first scene where we meet Mr. Yunioshi, the apartment manager, everything like that. But really, I mean, it's almost every scene with him in it. But the really the introduction to that, one of the questions was, well, what effect, if any, did the film have on the pace or direction of events at the time it was made? And one of the things in reading about this film, Breakfast at Tiffany's, the New York Times did a review of the movie recently after it was released, and they actually heralded Mickey Rooney's character, Mr. Yunioshi, saying that his character was his bucktooth, myopic Japanese character was broadly exotic and pretty much welcome. When they initially cast this role, the Blake Edwards, the director, wanted Mickey Rooney for the part for comedic purposes. So even though it's viewed nowadays as an extremely stereotypical and kind of and racist performance, that was not even on their minds at the time. So really the pace or direction of events, it really didn't it wasn't like an earth shattering, or it didn't really move any direction of events there. It was purely supposed to be comic relief. And Richard Shepard, the producer at the time, he said that he actually wanted to recast the role. He didn't want Mickey Rooney for the role. He felt it should be played by an individual of Japanese ethnicity. But I mean, even that aside, there are still very highly controversial stereotypes that Mr. Yunioshi displays. In an interview in 2008 with Mickey Rooney, he actually is quoted. He said, never in the 40 years after they had made it, there wasn't one complaint. Every place I've gone in the world, people say, "God, you are so funny." And he said Asians and Chinese came up to him to say that he was just out of this world. And he also said a little bit later on in that interview that if he had known that the portrayal would be offensive, he would have never have done it. That he never had meant to offend anybody by it. So it's it was, as far as the events of the time that it was made, it was just another comic relief to this movie Breakfast at Tiffany's. There, the downside and the sad thing though is that next question, it says, who saw the film and how might it have influenced them? Really, all the moviegoers that saw this film, were affected in one way, and whether or not they know it or not. That stereotyping and racism, it bleeds off subliminally, even if you are saying to yourself, that's not who Japanese or Asians are, that's not how they act, it still is in your mind there. But undoubtedly, this film was from a different era with different moral and ethical codes. And the people that were seeing this film, you think of it, it's only 15-ish years after the end of World War II, and all the filmgoers that were there, very realistically still remembered anti-Japanese propaganda from World War II, which Mickey Rooney's character, if you look at it, very closely resembles that propaganda. And so those individuals, they didn't. I think this is why they didn't really, or one big reason they didn't really protest or realize the stereotyping and the racist undertones of Mr. Yuniyoshi's role in the movie, as they were accustomed to that. And even though it was the role was slapstick, and that's how they cast it, just an over the top portrayal. It still, like we said earlier, it still had those negative effects on those who viewed it. It just kind of perpetuated that stereotype and that lie even further. And although I think that even if the role was cast as by an Asian or a person of Japanese descent or something like that, there's still that would have gotten rid of the yellow face aspect of the issue from the role, but there's still the stereotypical aspect to the role, which is that's just as bad as well. And the audience receptions, or the reception that the audience had to this role, really tells us about the time that it was made. The fact that there was no major objections to the role, that the New York Times actually lauded it and welcomed and accepted it. It tells us that the film was really produced in a time where it was okay for minorities to be portrayed in a characteristic fashion, and a time where really these representations were not given really any deep thought, but only just kind of the shallow thought of, hey, is this going to elicit some laughs? Is this going to be good for comic relief? There wasn't really any foresight given into this of, hey, could people or individuals or classes be really offended by these portrayals? So again, yeah, all in all, nowadays, it's obviously very unacceptable. We don't really see that today in films today. It still is around, still prevalent, but at the same time, I think it's not as major. One of the things that I'm just going to throw this in here, that kind of awoken me to this as well. Recently we watched the Thelma and Louise movie, and because there's I've always thought, like, well, obviously that's over the top. Mickey Rooney's character, absolutely false, not acceptable. But like, I am not of Asian descent, so I never felt really personally like offended by that or anything like that. But in watching Thelma and Louise, pretty much every white male that's in that movie was portrayed as just, sex-driven, misogynistic pigs that were really disgusting. And just even that generalization, I know it's not anywhere near Mr. Yuniyoshi or anything like that, but it's like, it kind of brought it closer to home to me. And I was like, wow, that's, because like that to me was offensive. I was like, that's like, I'm not okay with people thinking that that's how white guys act, even though it was over the top, and for that movie, it's like, I think that they did that for a reason, but it's like, I know most people probably know that, but there's somebody out there that probably doesn't, and they think that, and that's not cool. So I totally understand the backlash and the outcry of that role of Mr. Yuniyoshi, and yeah, totally, yeah, I get it, but yeah, so just summing it all up, yeah, not acceptable. And it's audience perception is definitely a different era than it was today. So that sums up my part. And yeah, hope you guys enjoyed the film.
All right. I'm going to stop broadcasting right now, and I'm going to go back and try to edit this.